Hi, welcome to tonight's Adventures in Writing. Today we're going to be looking at the process of writing, how you sit down, get on with it, and how you start, really.
Okay, so let's say I'm someone who has just decided I want to write a book. Maybe I've had an idea since I was young, and I've always had the story inside me, or maybe I've just decided I've got lots of spare time and I want to do something with that time, and I want to write a book. How do I do it? Where do I start?
Well, first you need that flash of inspiration, really. It depends what it is, whether it's a place you've been, a favourite character like Toothless over there. If you love Toothless, you could consider writing a story about dragons. Obviously you can't use him, he's copyrighted, but you could write a story about dragons. You could write in the style of your... you could write in the style of your favourite author. I mean, we have Shakespeare Duck down here. You may want to try writing as Shakespeare. I don't know how well that would go down these days, but it would certainly make you unique if you tried writing in his style now.
Yes, yeah, so, that's true.
Depending on your market, depends what you want to do. Whether you want to write a big literary piece, something along the lines of Oliver Twist or a Dickensian or Austen-type novel, or whether you want to write adventure fiction. Perhaps not much substance to it, but you go out, you adventure, it's a dashing run-through from start to finish, and you want to go down that route. But basically what you need to start with is an idea. Something simple, a place you've been, a phrase you saw.
Great, okay, so you've got your idea, you've had some inspiration, maybe you've combined several of your favourite films, maybe you've combined dragons, wizards and lightsabers, who knows. Then what do? How do you actually get pen to paper? How do you turn that into a great novel or a story?
A lot of patience. You have to really have the discipline to sit down and write it, because unfortunately, these things don't write themselves. Wouldn't it be great if they did? It would be amazing. But no, you have to be quite disciplined with it. You've got to sit down and write. Now, there's a lot of rules out there that will tell you need to aim for 2,000 words a day, or 20,000 words a day, or 16 pages a day, or something. Generally, what you need to do is you do kind of need to sit down and try to write every day. You may not manage it, we all have busy lives, we're all trying to fit it in around something else, but if you can try and get into a regular habit with it, that's great. The problem a lot of people have is that you procrastinate around, you sit around, you wait for the muse to hit you. I'm guilty of it. Sometimes I just sit there waiting, thinking, I need an idea. The idea is not going to hit you if you sit around waiting for it. Actually, Stephen King has some very good advice on this. If you sit around waiting for the muse, he's never going to show up. What you've got to do is grab him, beat him up and lock him in your basement so that you can have access to him whenever you want him, not the other way around. It's good advice. You have to make yourself sit down and do it, even if it's just 5 words a day, even if you've just done a couple of notes on the side. If you can try and get yourself into doing a little bit all the time, great.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, everyone knows how to get around. Everyone knows procrastination gets annoying, and I mean, my personal thing is to try and procrastinate in circles. Keep on procrastinating until you realise you'd rather be doing the thing that you were trying to avoid in the first place.
Yeah, you'll find a number of writers who are currently suffering from writer's block have extremely tidy houses because they're trying not to write.
Okay, so I've started writing, I've got my fantastic idea. How do I go about turning that into, how do I create interesting characters? How do I make an interesting plot? Where do I? At what point do I know how it's going to end? Do I start that at the beginning, or do I let that?
Again, it depends on the style of how you want to write. You will find there are a lot of writers out there whose first draft of their manuscript will essentially be a massive list of bullet points. They essentially write the entire book in bullet points. This happens, this happens, this happens, in flowcharts across the walls or anything. You then have other writers who will start with the start and just freehand write the whole thing through to the end with no idea where they're going, what they're doing, they just let the story take them. And then you have, then you have other people who will sit in the middle and they sort of have a rough idea, they want to start at A, you want to get through to B, and you have maybe 4 or 5 little scenes that you've thought of that you want to fit in there somewhere but you're not sure how they're going to go in. So you do a little bit of the plot outline and the rest of it is just winging your way through it and see what happens. There are merits to both. There is no right and wrong way to go about doing this.
And where do you sit in these options?
I tend to sit in the middle. I have a rough idea of, I quite fancy this story arc. I can start here. I've got a couple of ideas, generally based on films I've seen. If you've read my books, you'll notice that Indiana Jones here might play a rather large role in my inspiration.
It certainly does.
But, I tend to sit in the middle. I have a couple of set pieces that I've thought of that I think, I want to fit this in here, particularly sword fights. I'm quite good at the old sword fight scenes and things. So I know what I want to put in. I know roughly what point A is and what point B is. I don't know how to get in between them. And because I have a collection of characters, I have 6, I tend to let them kind of go off on their own and see what they want to do.
But it must need some planning in order to figure out, to make sure that they all get their own stories, all get their own...
It does, yeah. Trying to keep control of 6 of them is crazy. They tend to interact a lot. You get to know your characters, and sometimes they'll do something that for a writer is unexpected to you, but you suddenly realise, looking back over things, that actually that's more them than the plan you had for them.
And do you keep everything you write?
No. It's a lot of the stuff that you'll write just by winging it will occasionally be kind of naff, shall we say. It might be a bit rubbish because you've winged your way through it. You've written, your brain can work faster than your hand. You've misspelled things. You've written entire chunks of stuff that's kind of irrelevant because you were researching something at the same time. So, say for my first book, the King Arthur one, there was huge swathes that I cut out of that because I got really bogged down in the Arthurian mythology and was like, oh, we'll go off on this tangent somewhere and we'll wander off down here, and you end up embroiled in the history of Wales rather than what you're trying to actually put across in the book. Because if you research what you're writing, you get quite involved in it and you want to share with your readers what you've read that's fascinating about this. And occasionally it takes someone else to look through it and go, what the hell is this? For you to realise that that's not actually important to your story.
So, okay, so you've got a very planned approach versus a very organic, grown approach. And, but how do you know after that when you've written something good? What point do you know whether what you've written is worth going into the book?
As an author, you have a feel for it. Obviously, as an author, you're very attached to all the bits that you've written, and it's very, very difficult to get rid of bits. Some of the best advice, again, it comes from Stephen King. He's one of my favourites, so I quite like all his advice. There are other writers out there who give you extremely good advice as well, but a lot of them will come back to the point that Mr. Stephen King makes, which is you can write it all out, shove it in a box for a while and reread it. If you're bored, it's not good. What you have to do is put it away long enough for you to become a little bit detached from it so that you can, what's the phrase he uses? Kill your darlings, essentially. You've got to be able to get rid of things that aren't very good. And if you separate yourself from the work for a little bit, you can come at it with a fresh eye. Because the problem with doing everything yourself and going back through it is you know what you meant to say, you know what's supposed to happen, and you get very, very attached to bits that you as a writer like very, very much, and your readers either don't understand or don't think it's very good, or you've made an in-joke that to yourself as the writer is hilariously funny, and no one else is laughing because they don't know the punchline.
Indeed. So this is a really important part about get someone to be your editor or proofreader. Someone who ideally can read the work and give you an honest opinion. Maybe, hopefully, they'll be diplomatic about it.
You would hope that they were diplomatic about it because you've poured your heart and soul into this work. You don't want somebody to just turn around and say, oh, this is awful, and give you nothing else for it. It's all well and good. They can turn around and say, this is awful because of X, Y, and Z, and if you fix this, it'd be much better. That would be great. But yeah, you have to get someone else to look at it. Whether it's a professional editor, whether it's a good friend, a family member, somebody who will give you honest feedback, pick up on those pesky spelling errors that you will miss.
Well, it's not the spelling errors. It's making sure that the sentences make sense. Making sure that the story, when the story's in your head, I think. I mean, having edited the first parts of your novels, a lot of them don't make sense the first time you read through them, and they require work.
And it can take a fresh pair of eyes to notice a continuity error. There was an instance I think it was in the second book, my dad read through a bit of it and realised that I'd done something with a jacket in one scene and someone was wearing it in the other, and it just totally didn't work. So I hadn't spotted that in 4 or 5 read-throughs. You have to have someone else look at your work.
Absolutely. Okay, so then I've written my story, I've figured out how to write it. Endings, any advice?
Endings. Ooh, endings. I'm actually really bad at endings. It takes me a long, long time to sort an ending out, partly because I'm so attached to the story. I kind of don't want it to end because I'm enjoying writing it. But it can also be, it's as important as the beginning of your book. The beginning has to hook readers in. The end has to leave them satisfied. If you write a really terrible ending, your reader kind of puts the book down and thinks, well, it was good until the end, which was awful. We've all done it. We've all walked out of movie theatres or put down books and gone, it was great till the last chapter. What was that? So endings can be really tough, and I've rewritten the ends of both of mine 4, 5, 22 times to try and get that ending right. And again, it helps for somebody to read through it, because if your first one is terrible, you need to know. But hopefully that same someone who said it's awful will have a couple of pointers on what they as a reader were hoping was going to happen towards the end, because you can then formulate it around that. You may not take their advice per se, just take some bits of it, or you could go exactly with what they said and think, this works a lot better. Ultimately, as the writer, the choice is up to you, but always listen to the advice that you're given.
Great. Well, and of course, after you've written a book, you want to try publishing it. And if you want to find out about that, watch last week's video.
Yep, it's up on YouTube on my channel. If you search for SM Porter Author, you should be able to find it. So there's videos up there to subscribe to. There's also my history videos there if you're interested.
We've got the blog on the website.
Yes, new blog on the website for anyone who missed it on the Facebook page earlier this week. So if you check out my website, again, it's smporterauthor.co.uk. You'll be able to find my blog up on there. Okay, so that's everything for tonight. We hope to see you again next week with another writing piece. And Toothless is trying to say goodbye. So, good night, everyone.